welcome to Not Just Numbers, Honest Conversations with a Financial Advisor and Lawyer. I am Madison Demora, and I am here with Mike Gary. Mike is a financial advisor and a CFP and the founder and the CEO of Yardley Wealth Management. He is also an estate planning lawyer, and his law firm is Yardley Estate Planning. Hey, Mike.
Hey, Maddie, how are you today?
Great, great. How are you?
I'm good. It's Friday, it's spring,
Yeah,
good
yep.
things.
Couldn't be better. All right, so we found an article in the Wall Street Journal that we are going to discuss today, and it's titled Dave Ramsey Tells Millions What to Do with Their Money. People Under 40 Say He's Wrong. And this is by Julie Jargon. And you can find the article linked in the description. So here's the summary of the article. The article discusses how young adults are seeking financial advice but are increasingly questioning Dave Ramsey's traditional approach. Ramsey, a conservative radio host with a large following, promotes strict principles like avoiding debt and embracing frugality. However, many young people feel his advice doesn't fit their reality, especially aimed rising living costs and stagnant wages. They criticize his lack of consideration for modern financial challenges and his moralizing tone. While Ramsey's methods have helped some, others argue they're too extreme and don't allow for flexibility. Overall, there's a shift among young adults towards seeking more nuanced financial guidance. All right, so let's get into the first question. How do you think societal and economic changes have influenced the reception of Dave Ramsey's financial advice among young professionals?
Well, that's a good question. So I think in many ways things are harder for those starting out, right? Like buying a house now, we're at a level of unaffordability that hasn't been seen in quite some time. When interest rates are higher than they were for 15 years, they're still lower like than when I bought a house, but houses have appreciated a lot during that time. Also, college has become much less affordable, and so for some people, it's hard to get started. And those are the people that are seeking out financial advice. People whose parents pay for college and they get out and they get great paying jobs and they could save a lot right away probably aren't looking for advice online, right? And so I think some of those changes that really affect younger generations really have impacted how they'll how receptive they'll be to his kind of advice. And one of the things you said in the summary is a nuance thing. One of the things that's hard is like Dave Ramsey has a certain one size fits all approach that has helped a lot of people, but isn't right for probably many more people than it's helped.
Okay. All right. So, in what ways do you agree or disagree with criticism of Dave Ramsey's approach, particularly regarding issues like debt aversion and financial flexibility?
Yeah, so I think that he makes a good point sometimes about, how much car can or should you afford, how much how much you should have in living expenses. He probably makes some good points, but he also toes a pretty strict line. Like I think that, his advice is to buy a junker or clunker car that doesn't cost that much, and then you don't have to make payments on it, and then you save that money. Well, a lot of people who have to commute for a living and who aren't particularly handy with cars maybe want to buy a more reliable car. And then, buying a reliable car doesn't cost $2,000. Buying a reliable car in most parts of the country probably costs more than $20,000, even a used one, right? And
Yep.
so that kind of advice isn't really practical for a lot of people. Again, maybe it was different when he was coming of age in the 70s and early 80s when cars were much less complicated and people could do a lot of their own maintenance on them. Right now,
Yep.
cars are really complicated. Changing a headlight now is a hard process. I could change headlights in 2 minutes in the 80s. That's not possible anymore. There's a whole host of things that you just can't do. Right. So that's a big change. And, I don't think his advice hasn't changed, right? His advice has stayed the same for 40 years.
Yep. So that advice is coming from like the 70s and 80s, like you said.
Right, right,
Okay. All right.
right.
All right. So how might Dave Ramsey's background and personal experiences shape his financial philosophy? And to what extent should this be considered even evaluating his advice?
Yeah, so I think that's one of the biggest things. He will come right out and tell you in his story, he tried to strike it rich in real estate, took on too much debt, did fancy vacations to Hawaii, bought cars he couldn't afford, and then couldn't make payments and became bankrupt. And so it probably was a humbling experience for him. Probably my guess is that he's a natural born salesperson, and he didn't consider the risk of what he was doing. He's just going out, like selling houses, flipping houses, buying real estate, without necessarily knowing, how much debt is too much debt, what's reasonable. And so then he had a really bad episode, right? And he became bankrupt. And the if he came about that though and said, listen, guys, I had this experience and it really wasn't good. So I think you should do these things, right? And you should be careful about how much debt you have. Instead, he takes like a moralizing tone, as if having any kind of debt is just evil, and you're being a bad person for taking on debt, or for buying a reliable used car that's only 5 years old instead of 10 years old. And that's the part that I have a hard time with. Like, okay, so yeah, you did some really stupid things. You made all these like egregious mistakes. And now you're telling other people that they can't do what you did. Um, but not in like a kind, loving way or supportive way. He's telling people that they're being immoral by doing it. It's like the sinner who has had his conversion and now thinks that everybody else is going to hell, and they are the ones living the perfect life. Yes, I get a little heated when I talk about Dave Ramsey, because he's good at selling himself on the radio, but he gives a lot of bad advice. Some of the advice is good, and he's helped millions, so it's nuanced, right? But just because you do something really bad and stupid and then have to recover from that doesn't give you license to tell everybody else that they're being immoral when they do things.
Yep,
I'll stop my rant for now.
absolutely. So, what role do you believe social media platforms like TikTok playing in shaping discussions around personal finance, particularly in challenging traditional financial advice?
Yeah, so like the article had a couple different people who had posted like anti-Ramsey messages, and they've gotten a lot of traction, right? A lot of those, they had hundreds of thousands of likes and follows. Yeah, so like it's easy now, right? So you could hashtag Dave or anything related to him, and so people will see it and get a lot of people see it. Yeah, it's very different than say 10 or 15 years ago, when it would have been people talking privately with themselves saying, well, I don't really agree with this fellow's advice.
Yeah,
Now it's very different.
yeah, absolutely. So, considering the criticism of Dave Ramsey's advice on credit scores and home buying, what alternative approaches would you suggest for managing debt and making major financial decisions?
Sure. So his thing is that credit scores are no good. You increase your credit score so you could take on more debt, and you shouldn't have debt in the first place. And he says that you should pay off your mortgage as fast as you can. You shouldn't get a mortgage at all unless you could pay it off in 15 years. And I heard a quote a couple of years ago in a podcast where he said he doesn't know any millionaires who have mortgages. And well, that's BS. I know 100 millionaires who have had mortgages, probably more than that. Um, and I think that the traditional advice is better advice than Dave Ramsey, right? Yes, you should worry about your credit score. You should make sure you have good credit. you should make sure you use debt appropriately, right? So some debt is good. Debt in to buy a house because you want to live in a neighborhood for a long time. A debt can help you get that house and be in that neighborhood. Debt for a degree program that is going to have a return on investment or will get you set up for a career that will be fulfilling and hopefully enriching for you can be a good investment. Look, I took on debt to start this business. He
Mhm.
might say that's wrong. We took on a lot of debt to start this business. Well, you know what? I think it was the right idea.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
you know, we help hundreds of families. We have employees. It's a good business, and it wouldn't have been possible if I couldn't take on any debt.
Yeah.
So I think the more traditional route with managing your credit score and saving for a down payment, buying a house, again, making sure it's a house you can afford, making sure that you're not going to be too stretched and that you can afford it. I think that the difference with Dave and other advice sometimes is in the extremes, right? Like I'm not telling people they should take on debt that they can't afford, but I think you should take a look at it, maybe get some help from somebody else to see it if it's a reasonable amount, whether it's a financial advisor or maybe like somebody else, an accountant or some person who seems to be smart with handling money. Yeah, like you have to figure out what is a reasonable amount for you, but then it's okay. Do it.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you think there's a generational shift in attitudes towards debt and financial freedom, as suggested by some individuals critiquing Ramsey's advice? And how might this impact financial practices in the future?
It's a good question, and I don't know. There probably is some sort of shift. Things always change among generations, or often change. But I think part of it is like the people who lived during the Depression are um, passing, right? And a lot of them have passed already. And so like their kids were mostly baby boomers, right? Or the silent generation, right before them. Um, and so they grew up with people who lived during the Depression, right? Well, we haven't had a prolonged period like that, in 90 years. The financial crisis was pretty bad, but it wasn't the same as the Depression, right? Like people weren't standing in lines in the street for like soup. And so it's been so long. Yeah, like people don't have that same feeling. I think I told you, like my dad's parents used to have like cans of vegetables and stuff in the basement, like lined canned food, just in case. Because I think the depression was really bad and people were starving, and there's no really intervention for help. And so things were really bad for a long time. And then we went right into World War II. And then 5 years after, we were in Korea, right? So there are a lot of people who either lived through as adults or children some really scary bad times for a long time, right? And we haven't had that in a while. And so it's normal now for people not, and even like my parents' generation, my mom couldn't have gotten a credit card when my parents got married just because they wouldn't let women do that, right? So obviously there have been some big societal changes, and so I think it's normal. But the people that I know that are in your age demographic are very careful with money, very careful, like you,
Yeah.
my kids, like yeah, like so. I don't think one thing that we've talked about on other podcasts is there's always like every generation has a big, loud component of that generation thinking that the generations that come after them have had it easy. They're soft, they're weak, they don't work, everything's handed to them. Um, not realizing that the generation before them said the same thing about them, right? And sometimes it's a little bit true, right? So yes, it would be better to have been born in the 50s and 60s than the 30s and 40s, for sure. But I think that's enough rambling about that. But I think
Yes,
you get what I'm saying.
absolutely. Yeah. All right. So, Mike, as an experienced financial advisor, what do you think of Dave Ramsey's advice and the 7 baby steps? And would your opinions be shared by others by other experienced practitioners?
Okay. So I'd say, the idea of having some the first couple steps deal with having, like, you get $1,000 of emergency cash. That's the first thing, right? Yes, everybody should have emergency money, emergency savings. And then it was to start to pay down debt, um, other than your home. I love that step too. If you have debt other than your home, probably makes the sense to pay it off. Except if you have like a 0.9% financing on your car, or 1%, 1.9% financing on your car, and inflation is 3%, well, then that probably doesn't make sense to pay that off. If you could get 5% in your high yield money market account and that debt is 1.9%, that probably doesn't make sense. Then the next step is to have the 3 to 6 months of emergency cash. Again, that makes sense for a lot of people, doesn't make sense for everybody. If you have, if you make many hundreds of thousands of dollars a year and your expenses are 25 or $30,000 a month, which we see a lot, those people probably don't need to save 150 or $200,000 in an emergency fund, because there really aren't many $180,000 emergencies. Most things that are that expensive are paid for by insurance or a choice, right? And so, but if the median household income is $70,000 and you're talking about having $10,000 to $20,000 in emergency savings, yeah, that probably makes a lot of sense, because there are a lot of emergencies and things happen. The water heater goes, the roof goes, you know,
Yeah.
the pipe bursts. There's things. Um, After that, I think the next step is like to save like pay your house off and save for your kids' college, and then do your own savings. Well, I don't know if I would tell someone to um, totally have their kids' college paid for before they had their retirement set up, right? So I would tell people to make sure they're on a path to be able to retire some point in their 60s, right? And then money in excess of that, I would put towards children's college, because children can figure out a way to borrow or pay for their college, whereas most people eventually are going to have to retire. Um, the other thing is, like, I know in some advice, like he's talked about how people shouldn't have to take on debt for college. And that could be a generational thing too, because I think even if you go to, in many, many parts of the country, even if you go to your community college and state school, it's going to be more expensive than if going to like a private school at the time that he went to college, right? And so, and adjusted for inflation. So I don't know if that advice really works. And then the last thing is, save to build your wealth and give it away. Like, yeah, that when you have enough that everything else is paid for, your retirement is ready, your kids' retirement is ready, and then, yes, you would continue to save and invest and give away the parts that you want to give away. I think other experienced advisors are more likely to agree with me. That's why hundreds of them have been blocked by him on Twitter or X.
Yep. All right. Thanks for explaining that, Mike.
Sure, sure.
All right. So, one last question for you. What do you think of his investing philosophy, including expected returns and safe withdrawal rates for retirement?
Okay. Expected returns for the first part. He says
Yes.
the expected returns are 10 to 12% a year. And he advocates growth mutual funds that beat the S&P 500. Well, it's really easy to say that. It's hard to do that in practice, because very few funds consistently beat the S&P 500. 10 to 12% is probably higher than the expected return. I think like a 9 to 10% expected return is more likely if you just invest in stocks. But I wouldn't just invest in US large growth stocks. Invest throughout the world, like small stocks, small company stocks, foreign stocks. And a lot of people need bonds because they probably can't take the volatility of an all stock portfolio. And if you're taking distributions from a stock portfolio, it is going to really hurt your withdrawal rate, right? So the other part of the question is, traditionally, ever since Bill Bengen wrote his paper 30 years ago, most advisors stick to like a 4% withdrawal rate, meaning you have a balanced portfolio, you can withdraw about 4% of it, adjusted for inflation, and that money should last 30 years. And it works out like 96, 98% of the time, depending on when you test it. So it really works because if you need to stop making inflation adjustments or cut back a little bit to make sure you don't run out of money, it should work. He advocates like an 8% withdrawal rate. Like if you go back and check the numbers, I think that works like 5% of the time, right? So that would leave you in your 80s or 90s without any money, right? So that's not a good thing, right? So that
Yeah.
is way too high.
Yep.
Now he says, that's okay if you'll invest only in stocks and do that well. And I'd say that comes from someone who is not taking appropriate risk into consideration. I actually know a situation where my last employer before I got hired, they had somebody who had a lot of money. And the idea that he and my old boss got together was that they would just invest in the S&P 500 and the 2% dividends were enough to meet his living expenses on. So they would continue to accumulate money forever and that things would be great. Except for the market peaked in March of 2000, didn't make the full recovery for 2.5 years. And of course, when the market crashed, the companies in the S&P cut their dividend. They had to start selling parts of that fund to meet those needs. And so at that point, the S&P went down more than 50% in that 2.5 years. Took a little while for it to start to come back. And then in 2008 went down by more between 2008 and 2009. So that strategy would have crushed somebody between 2000 and 2010, right? If you're taking 8% out of something that goes down by 50%, you start one year with $1 million and you start year two with 420,000, you're going to feel pretty nervous about taking 80,000 out that next year. As you should be, because that money's just going to be gone. So I think that is short-sighted advice. It doesn't look at what could go wrong. Part of the issue with the 4% rule is it's not a lot of money, right? So, if you have $1 million, that means you can only withdraw $40,000 a year. And oftentimes what happens is people die with more money. Like they could have spent more money, but you don't know that until you get to be like in your 80s when maybe, it's not that easy to do like a big trip around the world or something. But I think, it's all a matter of what risk measures you want to take. And if you want to be sure of not running out of money, I would rather err on the side of having too much money. And then you could give to charity or your children or whoever you want to leave it to.
All right. Thanks, Mike. Thanks for explaining all of that to us. Did you want to add anything else to this episode?
No, I think that I think I think that all the major Dave Ramsey points have come out. Like I said, it's complicated. Like I'm gonna be a little bit more nuanced maybe than he is, and when he gives out his advice, and I'll say that I think that the 7 steps, 7 baby steps, there's a good starting place from that. But then I think what an individual should do would be based on his or her or their situation,
Yep.
right? So it's a good foundation, but then how does it apply to you?
Yeah.
All right.
Awesome. We are joined here today with Charles Barrett. Charles is the owner of FZ Works and also creative director for FZ Creative here in Yardley. Charles, would you like to explain to our listeners what your businesses are and what you do for a little living and a little background?
Sure, absolutely. Thank you guys for having me.
Yeah.
All right.
With FC Creative, so I've actually been established in Yardley Borough for quite a while, since 2000 and late 2010 is when I first expanded my business into the grist mill. And so I was in the grist mill for 12 and a half years, had a pretty large agency in there for a while. And so obviously, so FZ Creative is a brand marketing and design agency. And so we really pretty much handle everything from logo design, web development, print collateral, video, photography, production, just sort of everything and anything you would need to sort of build a brand from scratch, and as well as the sort of marketing of that brand. And so I was sort of I'm the managing creative director of that agency. And then just sort of how things sort of evolved is then we all know COVID showed up, and so then the world kind of changed, and the same building owner is Tom Kramer, who owns Kramer's Bakery, the grist mill, and several other buildings in Yardley. And he had just recently purchased this building, and he actually kind of came to me thinking about what he could do with it, and I sort of presented this idea to him about opening up a co-working space, sort of based on how the world had changed, and for me, honestly, it seemed like it was actually a pretty good fit with my agency and my brand marketing and design agency, and then running a co-working space. They sort of there's a lot of synergy there.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. I run into people, well, you run into a lot of other business owners or people who are wanting to do anything to stop working from home, I guess, and go out and meet other people and see people.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, that's really been probably one of the more rewarding parts of opening this space up
Okay.
was is the connections that are being made. To really kind of see that sort of that whole idea sort of come to fruition, where what a great idea to bring people together and then start to kind of create other relationships, and you can see these different all of a sudden people are swapping business cards, and all the way to the point where we'll have members that are taking walks down the canal, right? So it's a way to kind of not only a place for people to come and work, but for them to make connections, different relationships, and so that's been sort of getting better and better. And so we're hoping to kind of really sort of expand upon that.
That's great.
Oh. So can anyone go there to the FZ Works building? Is that open to anybody?
Absolutely. It
Yeah.
is. We do have memberships,
Okay.
right? So you could be a full-time member. We have all sorts of different sort of part-time memberships where you're just sort of pre-buying days, and just sort of the more days that you buy, then that price per day obviously reduces. But we also just have day passes, and where you can just come in for the day. It's like $40 to come in for the day, and you can rent private rooms if you want to have an opportunity to have a private phone call. Where we have our breakout rooms. We have a larger conference room that is also a rentable resource that people don't have to be members. We do have sometimes we'll have different teams of people that say, like, there's teams of people that work remotely now, and so twice a month they'll rent my conference room, and so then they can all kind of come together. We got the whiteboard, we got the monitor on the wall, everything they would need, and then they have to basically have their meetings all day, and then they have access to the whole space. So we have our coffee bar, our beverage bar, and our location couldn't be any better, right smack dab in the middle of Yardley.
Wow.
Right. It's thanks for giving me the tour a couple of weeks, maybe a month or two ago now.
Yeah.
It's a great space, and there's all kinds of different options for people who want to go in there. Like you said, you have that conference room, the little coffee bar. Like it's really nice, and people should definitely check it out. And I think that it can be really useful for lots of different things. I told you, even like, we've taken over the whole first floor now of Scott's building, but there'll be times where maybe we want to talk about things that are kind of important, but not everybody should be in the meeting. And yeah, I could definitely see having to use a conference room at some point in the future, even getting out of like the space. I love this space, but it's always good to it's always good to move things around a little bit.
Yeah, no
Absolutely.
doubt. And the space is also fully rentable, right? So somebody, so it's not only, so the co-working component is really just one portion of the business model, is that the whole space itself is rentable. And we've had some divisions of actually J&J have come out and they actually rented the whole space for a week.
Wow.
And they did to do these workshops and breakouts, and it works out really well. So I just basically let my members know that it's just closed for a private event, and people can take over the entire space, and then that gives us the opportunity to sort of orchestrate catering throughout town. We have, Pretty Bird bringing up fresh coffee. We got Vault bringing over pizzas. We got Panda bringing over gelato, right? And so there's a lot that you can do to kind of create a little custom event for your company as well.
Wow.
Yeah.
And I feel like I've seen comedy night on Instagram. I haven't been to it yet, but tell me about that. Tell our listeners about that.
Yeah, so the comedy night is a blast, right? That was again, to another part of the business model was that we wanted to be able to put on our own events. And so we started with these comedy events. And basically, how it really kind of came to fruition is that I connected with a really tremendous producer. His name is Tim Conniff. He's a regular at the Comedy Cabaret and just produces shows all around the tri-state area. And he is really well connected with just some incredible talent. And so how we set it up is that we kind of like to refer to it as like our speakeasy entrance, is that we have our front door entrance, which is right off of Main Street. And then we have this side entrance, which is off of the parking lot where the famous Yardley mural is. And so we sort of have everybody kind of come up through the back entrance. We rearrange the entire space. We fit about 70 people up here,
Wow.
and every single show has been sold out since
Wow.
we started it. And we have comedians booked out till June.
Wow.
So we are going to be, if anybody misses a show and they see it sold out, we'll have a full schedule on our website, and for any other shows coming up in the future. But it is really, really a fun time. It's on a Thursday night. It's the doors open at 7. The show's from like 8 to about 9:30, 9:45, something like that. It goes for a couple hours. It's a BYOB event, and it's $30 a ticket. It's real easy, and it's just been really, really fun, really well received in the town. People are really looking for these fun little things to do.
Yeah.
Yeah. I
Yes,
like
it's
the
been
idea
it's been
that you
solid.
do. I like the idea that you do different things,
Yeah.
right? To certainly in the beginning when you're trying to figure out and get customers, get more full. I like the idea, right? That you have the comedy night, you have the private events. I think I saw something about like somebody having a shower there or something.
Hmm.
But yeah, it's great and it's beautiful space. I'm glad it's getting used. Nice work
Yeah,
with that.
the rentals are really now starting to kick in. That people are starting to realize that they can rent this for parties. This past Saturday there was a surprise retirement party. We have multiple birthday parties already booked, and some for a 60th birthday party, and we have 1-year-old birthday parties.
Wow.
Wow.
Right, where it's because one of the things that people really like about it is that it could be, a space could be available on a Saturday or Sunday afternoon. And what kind of sets us apart from other spaces is that you get to bring your own food, you get to bring anything you want. You basically bring it in to supply it your own, beer or wine if you want, just because, where some people drink and some people don't, so you have that
Mhm.
that capacity. And then you take over the whole space. So especially for like these younger kids coming to a party, it's like you don't have to worry about running around a restaurant. You have your own bathrooms, you have it, you basically lock down the whole space and it's all yours. Which is kind of, I think, is an advantage as opposed to, potentially being in a restaurant or anything, even though those are, perfect for any other situation. But I think we sort of have a little bit of a unique situation where it could be really customized,
Sure.
for whatever that situation is.
I keep going back to FZ Works, and your name is Charles Barrett. Like, where does the FZ come from?
So the FZ comes from flood zone, and so it goes back to my S corp, which is FZ Media Design Inc. And the origin of that name is where my first home here in Yardley, which is back in the mid '90s, was down on Morgan Avenue,
Okay.
right down in the borough. And so I had, at the time I was commuting to New York City, but I had a freelance business as well where I would do freelance illustration, Photoshop, design work, working out of my home. And with that business, I was calling it Flood Zone Studios because the river, at the time back then, the river would flood all the time. And but then when we moved out, and then when I decided to really go out on my own and really kind of start my own agency, I called it FZ Media Design Inc. And then I go doing business as a DBA, doing business as FZ Creative as the agency, because we do just such a wide amount, just as far as the level of kind of work that we do, it's very broad.
Okay.
We're not like very specific because of everybody has creative needs, marketing needs, branding needs, and that business continuously evolves, right?
Right.
And so then when I opened up the co-working space, I went with FZ Works, and it just sort of worked. It's catchy.
Yeah, I'd
That's
say
great.
so. Yeah.
When did you take that leap to stop commuting from New York and fully go out on your own? How long has that been?
That was in 2007 is when I actually fully said, I was like, when I decided to just kind of go out on my own. And there was a lot of opportunity at the time in the music industry. I worked for Bertelsmann Music Group, Atlantic Records, RCA, Elektra. So I had an opportunity to kind of follow that, and it was really fun. As you can imagine, there was working with everybody from Sugar Ray to P Diddy to all these, so I got to go to some fun parties and do some really fun projects. And then I was there for the rise of the music industry. Then also I was there for sort of that demise when MP3s sort of hit the scene. When there was Napster and stuff. I
Right.
was actually working for BMG at the time when they paid 50 million or something for Napster, thinking that they were going to stop what had already started. But the dam was broken, right?
Right.
So then that whole music industry world sort of changed, and sort of from that is then I rolled into more corporate. I ended up getting really into the careers space for a while. And what really sort of expanded my agency, because at a time when I was in the grist mill, I had as many as 10 people working for me. And I had some large contracts with Career Builder, back when they were, the career site to go to.
Sure.
And so I worked with them for years and sort of helping them develop a lot of their career sites and career products and all of their digital products. And so that was a big catalyst to really sort of, grow my agency.
Very cool.
Yeah. So I saw, going back to FC Creative. So on your website, I see you guys do logo design, photography, video production, marketing collateral. So I know you said you were big in the music industry. So are you just in the music industry, or is it more for any type of business?
Yeah, I would definitely say that we are really any type of business.
Mm.
And honestly, I think that's probably my specialty, to be
Yeah.
honest, is the fact is that we don't have a niche market that we work with. So we've done a lot of works with restaurants and sort of creating and building their whole brand, and then everything from different, crisis management to interior design to even working in the golf industry right now. So there's no really any particular. There's been a couple of call out logos that we've actually done here in town. We did Firehouse Cycle, did
Nice.
Yardley General, Salon 9, Spearhead. We actually did modified Kramer's Bakery, and we even go all the way back to the Continental Tavern logo that you're
Wow.
seeing right now. They had an original sort of like small little like black and white drawing of this little colonial soldier, and I just modified it and made it made it better for him,
Yeah.
made it better for Frank Lyons. So
That's
yeah, so
great.
we've had our hands in a lot of in a
Yeah.
lot of businesses here in town as well. And so which has always been fun. It's always good to kind of see your work sort of spread throughout the town.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. You have your mark a little bit everywhere in
Yeah,
Yardley.
a little bit here and
Yeah.
there.
That's awesome. During COVID, how did FC Creative do?
Well, just like any business,
Yeah.
it was a big hit,
Yeah.
right? It really changed the world in a lot of ways. And that was because again, we work on a lot of contracts, a lot of contract basis, and then when everybody was just shut down, people really didn't know sort of what their next move was, what their future was.
Right.
So it definitely affected it in a pretty large way in the sense that I kind of reduced my agency down, reduced my overhead, and now now that I have a much larger network of outsourcing instead of having really full-time employees. And but then with that is that it then came the opportunity here to open up FC Works, and with and to try to kind of reinvent to a degree, right? Which
Yeah.
is part of the challenge, but that's sort of part of the process of being an entrepreneur, is that you have to be able to be agile and figure out what the next steps are, and follow that.
When did FC Works actually open? Pretty recent, right?
F- yeah, it's coming up on its first year. So
Okay.
FC Works, our grand opening was of May of 2023.
Okay.
And so that's when we had our ribbon cutting, and yeah, it's been going well.
That's
No, that's
awesome.
great.
Yes. Do you have any employees that work for you?
I don't have any, say, full-time staff employees,
Okay.
but I do have a lot of consistent people that I work with that help with marketing, that help with press releases, with on the creative side. And then I also have some people here as members of FZ Works that help with party planning and events and client relations. And so it's good. It's sort of been it sort of it's definitely worked in the sense where the idea of opening up a space where I'm bringing professionals together has actually offered me opportunity to find people to work with to help support my agency. So it actually does work, hand in hand.
Oh, yeah.
And then I have teams of developers, multiple different teams of developers from every kind of website management to app development, and these days they're kind of all over the world.
Right.
But that's just the nature of that business now. Is that development teams are they're much more overseas with here in the States local management type thing, but that's sort of all over the place.
Okay.
Okay. All right. So, with all the success you have achieved, have you had any big challenges that you faced or you are facing?
I'd say probably the biggest challenge is let's say on the agency side is really staying on top of technology and how people are communicating with each other. Um, we all know how it just changes constantly, right?
Right.
And really trying to kind of stay in front of that wave and understanding even the psychology of it is really probably the largest challenge. But again, it's an enjoyable challenge. You're always being challenged yourself to learn a new platform, and just try to follow that, and then try to continue to be sort of creative and smart and being able to deliver that. At the end of the day, when it comes to, branding and marketing, that's always pretty consistent, right? Like you want to be consistent, you want to be smart, you want to have like, a very smart, consistent brand, how you portray yourself, and then, utilizing those tools the best as possible, and just trying to leverage that, right? So, that's how it sort of constantly evolves. And then when it comes to FC Works, it's really it's about like the people and the relationships and things like, and that's again, to circle back, one of the things that I enjoy the most is, the people that I'm getting to meet and the relationships that I'm making with our members and our full-time members, and again, it just goes to show how great this town is, because people are just so nice. They're just such a great group of people in this area. And I have such great members that, I mean, they'll get here before me. They'll take the sign out. They're making coffee. They're turning on the music. It's like because they love it as well, right? So the sort of autonomy that I sort of designed into the space is really working out well.
So if someone does want to become a member, how does it work? Do they go online to do it, or is it an in-person sign up for the membership? How does that work?
Sure. All they have to do is go to fzworks.space, and just go to our website, and we list all of the different kinds of memberships there. And one of the things that anybody can do without, let's say, if they're not ready to commit and they're just interested in finding out more, they can sign up as a community member, and a community member is free. And all that means is that you're going to just be able to, you're going to get our emails, you're going to get our notifications. And when you are a community member, you're basically creating a username and password for your account. Now, the entire space is controlled from a smartphone, right? So you download an app, and we have an app called Proximity, and there's literally a QR code right at our front door to be able to download that app. And then that same username and password that you use to sign up as a community member, that will then give you access to the space. And that's where you can buy a day pass, you can upgrade your membership, you can make reservations to our breakout rooms, our conference room. You can actually also be able to see a list of all of the other members. So it becomes this little bit of a community resource that we really try to encourage people to, put your information in there. If you're a financial planner, if you're an interior designer, if you're a business coach, if you're, anything, it's a way to kind of be able to, that people are able to communicate and get together. So we really built the system to be autonomous. Like, I don't need to be here every day. Members, if you're a member and you have, the door at the street level opens up, it automatically unlocks at 7:45 a.m. And then the door at the top of the stairs, you just control it through your phone, unlock the door, and you're in.
Wow.
Oh.
That is so cool. So that is FZ Works. So what about FZ Creative? If someone is interested in reaching out to you about, maybe some logo design, maybe some video production, how do they reach out to you?
Same thing. They can just go to the website, fzcreative.com. And through there, obviously, we have forms to be able to reach out and contact, and then just lots of samples of our work. So there's just, you could see samples of logo design, just marketing strategy, videos, photography, everything. So there's a lot on there if people wanted to really kind of get a sense of the level of work that we do, and lists all the other different kinds of technology platforms that we work on. So everything is on the site, and at the same time, anybody can just stop by at FZ Works, 9 South Main Street. Just come on up. Even if you're not a member, you just want to knock on the door, I'm almost always here. So I'm always willing to just, sit down with anybody and have a conversation about what their needs are. There's no obligation, no nothing. It's all part of the process. It all starts with a conversation.
And Charles, can I ask a question? It's it may be like real simplistic one, but we often hear the term branding, right? Like, what does that mean? And so like say somebody opens up their business and they're really good at their skill or their profession, but they really don't know, like, I don't know what they should look like, what their branding is. Like, what does branding mean? And like what kind of process would somebody go through to make sure that they were, like, I guess, showing themselves in the best light, or whatever branding is?
Sure. I mean, to understand branding, it's really about not only the service that you provide, but it's also like, what is your persona? How does it really represent you, your business model, and everything about that, right? So there's obviously lots of different ways to approach it. With again, just sort of it always starts out with the conversation and breaking down exactly what your business model is, who you're going after, what's your target market, and really sort of understand that, and then also how to differentiate you from from the potentially crowded field that could be out there. So that's sort of what we really try to focus on, is
Okay.
saying how can we sort of elevate you and elevate your brand in a creative way. And that's where that sort of breaks down. And then when we talk about that consistency, what it is that we will bring to the table is making sure that your business cards, your collateral material, your websites, your marketing, your social posts, that everything all the way across the board has a consistent look and feel and vibe that you feel comfortable with, that really represents you. People want to see that consistency, and that just shows. And I feel that really represents somebody when they really put forth a consistent effort, that just elevates your level of professionalism, and that's what your customers and clients are going to gravitate towards.
Okay. Yeah, thanks for taking the time to explain that. I really appreciate it.
Sure.
Yeah. Yeah. Hopefully that's helpful for the new business owners coming into the market. All right. So Charles, is there anything else you want to speak about? Anything we
I
didn't
think,
cover?
I mean, I think we really kind of covered a lot of things today. Um, I just, if anything, just to kind of summarize, is again about what a great town Yardley is, and Yardley Borough, right? Again, I didn't grow up here. I grew up in North Jersey, Milburn Short Hills area, but I met my wife in Philadelphia at art school, and she grew up here. And she was went to Villa Victoria back in the 80s, across the river.
Okay. Sure.
And right. And but just fell in love with this town. Raised my boys here, and it's just been, just everything about it, has it just in the way that even my business has been received. It's just, it's really worth mentioning, and so I'm just really looking forward to continuing to try to be as creative and fun with FZ Works. The big thing is really trying to make it a place that can, really bring people together for their own events, for their own parties, be it corporate, be it social, whatever it may be, and then what other kind of events that we can put on to sort of bring something special to town, to kind of differentiate ourselves from other small towns in the area.
Are you on any social media?
Sure, we predominantly focus mostly on Instagram.
Okay.
So that's another great way for people to follow FZ Works, is just FZ Works _ Yardley. And so that's where we post a lot of our events and things, and they can really kind of see what's going on, especially if we're having any sort of networking events. We're going to be actually having a headshot happy hour event coming up
Oh,
soon,
that
where
is
we have
so
a professional
cool.
photographer coming in and have a little happy hour around it, where people could take brand new, fresh headshots. So we're going to be doing more and more of those type events. And then for FZ Creative, again, that's just FZ Creative on Instagram, and we post a lot of different projects and things that we do when we're traveling and doing different photo shoots, video shoots. Examples of our work is up there as well.
Yeah. So you
Well, that sounds great.
mentioned traveling. So traveling is part of the business with FC
Absolutely.
Creative. Yep.
Yeah, with FC Creative, we will travel for any client, really. That's always been sort of part of it. We were just recently down in Florida at the PGA show for a golf client that we're helping sort of build his online brand and a sort of a subscription based video tutorial website. And we've traveled as far as Saudi Arabia, if you can believe that. We actually had a we had a client that was in the private aviation industry for a while, and so he actually went over there. So
Oh,
Wow.
yeah, we're always looking for opportunity, but traveling is certainly not a problem.
Awesome. All right.
great.
That's great to know. That's great to know. It was great talking to you and great to hear about your business.
Yeah, thanks for taking
Yeah,
the
thank
time.
you
We
guys
really
so much.
Yeah,
appreciate it.
absolutely. All
Great,
right.
thank you both. I really appreciate it. It was
All right.
fun, and yeah, you guys have a great day.
For more information on Yardley Wealth Management or Yardley Estate Planning, you could visit our website at yardleywealth.net and yardleyestate.net. You can also follow us on socials at Yardley Wealth Management. This podcast has been produced by Madison Jamora and Mike Gary with technical and artistic help from Poe Productions.